Hello. Let me say thank you for joining us tonight. The summer series at the Madison Church of Christ is an annual event that's been going on for 20 years. And every year it's such a blessing to our lives, but this year it's been an exceptional blessing because of the subject matter. It's challenging us and encouraging us to grow in our spiritual maturity. Last week, our preaching intern, Brother Brooks Jackson, did a great job encouraging us to love God, to love our fellow man, and to love Jesus. Tonight, we're blessed to have one who's been with us, I don't know how many countless times. That's Brother Kizer. Drew is a tremendously gifted gospel preacher, and he's been assigned the topic tonight and graciously accepted the idea of preaching on evangelism. His topic is entitled, "He that wins souls is wise," taken from the book of Proverbs. And we look forward to his reminder of our responsibility and his encouragement and suggestions on how we can fulfill that responsibility in this time of pandemic when we are so limited to our social contacting. So let's pay very close attention to Drew tonight as we strive to learn how to be wise by winning souls.
Hello everyone at the Madison Church of Christ. You know, I knew one of these years I wouldn't be able to come up for the summer and visit with you and speak in person at your summer series. I just had no idea it would be because of an epidemic, but here we are. This has been a really strange year, and I wish I could be with you in person, but I'm very thankful that we have this technology that connects us virtually where I can still share a lesson with you from God's Word as a part of your series this year. And as I understand, you're talking about spiritual maturity, and my assignment for tonight is on winning souls, the matter of evangelism. And so that's what we'll be spending the next few minutes talking about, evangelism. And it's a very difficult time to be talking about that subject. Evangelism is not very popular these days. And I suppose some of that has to do with changing attitudes. 20, 30 years ago, you'd never hear somebody boasting about not believing in God, or at least maybe that kind of attitude had just gotten started. But these days, it's very common, it's even popular in some circles, to be skeptical towards the existence of God. And so attitudes are changing out there in the world that are turning people against evangelism. And it's not just in the world, it's also among professing Christians. I was really shocked last year to see a headline that said almost half of Christian millennials think it's wrong to do evangelism. If you dug into it, basically they asked them what they thought about sharing their faith with others with the intention of getting others to change their faith for their own faith. And nearly half, I think it was 48% of Christian millennials said, that's wrong, that shouldn't be done. Another example that I could share with you comes from, I think, 2018. You may remember this one, where a missionary went out to the North Sentinel Islands, and his intention was to share Christ with these islanders that were living out there living on the land, and they did not welcome visitors, and they warned the missionary not to come, and when he came, they killed him. And that story is shocking, but what was even more shocking was the reaction on social media. So many people were angry, not with the islanders who murdered this man, but with the man for daring to go out and talk about Jesus with people who had never heard about him before. This is the climate we live in today. Evangelism is very controversial. Now, why that is, I'm not sure that I can tell you, but I can say this: evangelism has always been controversial. It was so controversial that Jesus and his disciples died for conducting evangelism, and it's controversial today. Now, I believe that if people knew our motives, if they knew what our mission really was, it wouldn't be as controversial, because they would know that we're preaching the gospel out of love. We're speaking the truth in love. But then I can understand why the world sometimes doesn't understand our motives, because we have trouble understanding our motives. And so that's why I want to talk about soul winning tonight, because we can always refresh ourselves on the mission and the motives behind evangelism. And what better way to do that than to look at the example of Jesus Christ? I want to look at Jesus' interaction with Zacchaeus in Luke 19, namely because that's where we get that beautiful verse 10, that the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That's his mission statement, and it's in the context of Zacchaeus. I want to look at the whole story, because as we look at it, we can take a peek at how Jesus did evangelism, and it serves as a great example for all of us on how we should evangelize the world and go out to win souls. So let's examine it in 4 points, and here's the first one. We see, first of all, his mission. And his mission, as was stated in that verse I quoted just a moment ago, Luke chapter 19, verse 10, was to seek and to save the lost. What do you think of when you hear the word lost? I think most of us think of condemned or doomed or eternal punishment, something very dark and very negative. And technically, those connotations belong to the term lost. However, it also causes us to withdraw away from the lost and separate ourselves from it, which isn't good. So I want to trace the word back to its source and just really get to the root meaning of the word. And if you look at it that way, what does it mean? The word lost simply means to be in the wrong place. Someone who's lost is someone just like you and me who just happens to be in the wrong place. In fact, all of us have been lost, haven't we? All of us have been in the wrong place. Something that's lost is still valuable. It just can't serve its purpose where it is. like your car keys, which I'm sure you have lost before. They're not hanging on that peg by the door, or they're not in the ignition of your car. They're somewhere in the back of your purse or somewhere on the floor where they don't belong, so they're no good to you until they can be found. Someone who is lost is someone who's just in the wrong place and who needs to be led to the right place where he or she can be valued and can be honored and can be seen as worthy by God. That's what the word lost means. And because it means that, we have to understand as a church that we can't help the lost by just staying within our four walls of our church buildings and just hanging around with each other. We're never going to bring the lost to Christ unless we go out to where they are and bring them in. And so to be lost is to be in the wrong place, and we have to go out to those places and find them and bring them to Jesus. And that's what Jesus did with Zacchaeus. He went out to seek and to save the lost. That was his mission, and it was a mission that was fueled by love. He wanted Zacchaeus and the others to follow him because he cared about them. He loved them very much. He didn't come to condemn the world. John talks about this in John 3:17 and 18. The world was condemned already. It didn't need Jesus' help to be condemned. What the world needed was a Savior. We can really get a good glimpse of Jesus' motives in evangelism and soul winning when we look at Luke chapter 15. It's a very familiar chapter because it has these three wonderful parables about lost things. And in each parable, the love and the joy of finding the lost is highlighted. The first parable is the parable of the lost sheep. It's about a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep in the field to go out and find one that has gone astray. And when he finds it, he returns home rejoicing with it on his shoulders. And this is what Jesus says in John 15, verse 7. He says, "Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." The next parable is the parable of the lost coin. A woman has 10 silver coins. She loses one. She sweeps the house and cleans and looks and looks and looks until she finds it. And when she finds it, she invites all her friends over and they have a celebration. And again, Jesus makes an application. This is Luke 15, verse 10. "Just so, I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents." And then we come to the parable of the prodigal son. This young man who demanded his father's inheritance. He went out and he wasted it on riotous living. He lost all of his friends. He lost all of his money and decided to come home and beg to be a servant. But when he was afar off, his father saw him. He ran to him. He had compassion on him. He kissed him and embraced him and called for the fattened calf. And he said, Luke 15:32, "It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this," he's speaking to the older brother, "your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." Now, do you see the celebration? Do you see the joy? That tells us that there are pure motives behind soul winning, at least with regard to Jesus. He searched and found the lost because he cared about them, because he loved them very much. And we should share that concern as well. Now, here's a couple things I need to warn you about. Number one, when you do this, people are going to misunderstand and they're going to criticize you. Look at what happened in Zacchaeus' case. Luke 19:7, when they saw that Jesus had spoken with Zacchaeus and declared salvation to him and went to his home to dine with him, they grumbled, "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." Why? Because he decided to reach out in compassion to someone who is lost. Now, Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and people hated tax collectors for a number of reasons. One, they collected taxes on behalf of the Roman government, and the Jews hated the Roman Empire. They saw it as an oppressive government that had not been invited in. But also tax collectors they had the reputation of skimming off the top, taking more than their fair share, taking more than they were supposed to. Maybe Zacchaeus did that, maybe not. But regardless, he was judged beforehand, and Jesus was criticized for reaching out to somebody like that. But if we're going to win the souls of the lost, we're going to be winning souls of people who are lost, who are in the wrong place, who aren't living the way that they should live, who have bad reputations. And that may mean interacting with people that make us uncomfortable and feel awkward. It may mean interacting with people that we normally aren't accustomed to hanging out with. It may mean interacting with people that will bring judgment on ourselves by our own brothers and sisters who claim that they also win souls. We can't let that get in the way. If we're going to seek and save the lost, we have to go to the wrong place and find them where they are. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is whenever the lost receive the gospel and believe it, they're going to experience dramatic change in their lives. Look what happened with Zacchaeus. He says this tax collector, this very wealthy man, in verse 8, "Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." That's quite remarkable. This man who was perhaps greedy and maybe a thief, willing to give all of this away, half of his goods, restoring fourfold whatever he had stolen from somebody. That's really, really amazing. But that's what the gospel does. It has the power to change you. And we're talking about winning souls. What is a soul? Your soul is your heart. And in biblical terms, the soul or the inner person or the heart is in three parts. It's your thoughts, your feelings, and your will. Now, a lot of people try to do what's right using only 1/3 of their soul or their heart, their will, right? They try to change their behavior through their willpower, pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. They're determined to do what's right, but they fail every time. Why? Because they're only using 1/3 of their heart. Now, the gospel can make this great change, this great transformation in people's lives, because it doesn't just change your will. It doesn't just make you momentarily decide, I want to do better. It changes your entire inner being, your entire soul. It is a winning of the soul. Your thoughts, your feelings, and your will. And when all of that is turned around, the results are really remarkable. You see things like people who were tax collectors giving away half of their goods and restoring what they had stolen fourfold. There was a lot in that first point, but Jesus' mission was big. It was to seek and save the lost, those who are in the wrong place. And when we understood that, I wanted you to understand two things. First, a warning. You'll get criticized when you get involved in that kind of activity. But secondly, also realize that it's going to change lives in a big way, like it changed the life of Zacchaeus. But let's move on to something else about Jesus' example of soul winning. And that gets us to his method. And I want us to look at his method in three ways, noting, first of all, that his method was natural. If you look at Luke 19, verse 1, you see that he encountered Zacchaeus as he was passing through that way. He was just going about his business, traveling through, when he came to find Zacchaeus up in that sycamore tree, trying to see Jesus because he was short of stature. Now, I think that's a good lesson for us, because a lot of times our methods are contrived and manufactured. And because of that, they're awkward and they don't come off very well with people, and they turn people away. What if we just interacted with people in our normal course of business, always keeping in mind that we're trying to let our light shine? That's what Jesus did. He got out there, he lived amongst the people, and when he had opportunities, and there were plenty of them, he would share the truth with others. We can do that. But so many times our attempts are abrasive, they turn people off, So many times we fail to use tact and we try to rush someone into the truth or twist their arm and take them where they don't want to go. That wasn't the way Jesus won souls. His approach was a natural approach. Here's another example. It was relational also. It wasn't just natural, it was relational. He built relationships with the people that he talked to. That is so important, because whenever you are trying to talk somebody into obeying Christ, you're coaxing them out of their old community into a new community. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, verse 37. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He's saying you may have to leave your family in order to serve me. But Jesus always had a relationship waiting for those people who left their old way of life and their old associations. We don't always do that, though. We try to make a quick contact with somebody, lead them to Christ, and then move on to the next person. It's no wonder so many people fall away, because we pull them out of their old associations, an old community that, granted, wasn't very good for them, but where do we put them? We throw them into isolation and leave them alone. We've got to build relationships with others if we expect to have any long-term success in disciple making. Now, you'll notice whenever Jesus converted Zacchaeus, he went home with him, presumably to share a meal. And when people eat together, they bond, they build friendships. Jesus made a friend that day. And you may not like to hear this, but friends change minds more than facts do. You know, I really wish that we could just put this lesson out on the internet and put the information we needed to out on the internet and the airwaves, and people would just change their minds and follow Christ because we told them to. But that's not the way it works. Friends change minds, not facts. That doesn't mean we don't need the facts. It just means before you can have any success with somebody, you've got to show them that you care about them as a person. So it was relational. And the third thing about his method is that it was conversational. He took the time to have a conversation with Zacchaeus. You don't have a soliloquy here in Luke 19 or a lecture. You have Jesus talking with somebody who was a very unlikely suspect for him. And Jesus was doing this all the time. Take a minute and go to John chapter 4 and look at how Jesus talked with the Samaritan woman at the well. You'll notice that he did a tremendous amount of listening when he was speaking to her. And I find that very interesting. He wasn't the first one to bring up that he was doing something socially taboo by talking with her. She was the one that brought up that he had a total disregard for racial prejudice, that he was no respecter of persons, that he, a Jew, was speaking with a Samaritan. Who was the first person to bring up her sin? He asked a question, and she's the one that confessed that she was living in a sinful way. Who was the first person to suggest that he was a prophet? It was the Samaritan woman. The first person to bring up the Messiah, it was the Samaritan woman. She may have spoken more words on that occasion than Jesus, and yet he changed her life. He did a lot of listening. We've got to listen more. We've got to listen to the people we're talking to and show them that we value them as human beings. A few years back, George Barna and David Kinnaman wrote a book called Churchless, and I'd like to share with you something from that book. Here's what it says. Listening, instead of talking, may be the best way to connect with those who don't share Christian worldview assumptions. If we don't take time to hear where skeptics, or any churchless people for that matter, are coming from and what they are saying, we're not really in a conversation. We're just waiting for our chance to preach. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody where you're really not listening to what they say? You're not valuing them as a human being. You're just waiting for your chance to preach. People don't listen to that approach. I don't know if they ever did, but they certainly don't today. And what did Jesus do with Zacchaeus? What if Jesus had gone to Zacchaeus and said, "Look, you wee little man," that's what we call him in the song, wee little man. "Look, you wee little man, you come down out of that tree. I know that you've been a fraud, you're a tax collector, you're a traitor to your country, and you need to come down and give half of your goods to the poor. And I want I know you've been stealing from people. I want you to restore what you've stolen fourfold and go home and prepare a meal for me. I'm coming to your house and we're going to eat." And what if he had talked to Zacchaeus that way? I don't think he would have been as successful as he was. Jesus knew the importance of listening to people. And if the Lord of the universe, the omniscient God, if he can listen to others, can't we take a minute and listen to others as well and have conversations with them? Well, that's his method. Let's go on to his meditation. Jesus spent a lot of time in solitude, praying and preparing to do evangelism. Now again, if the Lord of the universe could listen to people, we should listen to people. Well, if the Lord of the universe needed to prepare to win souls in prayer, we must prepare also. Let's move away from Luke chapter 19 for just a moment and look at Mark chapter 1. This is verse 35 through 39. "Rising very early in the morning while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon," that's Peter, "and those who were with him found him and said, 'Everyone is looking for you.' And he said to them, 'Let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out.' And he went out through all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons." Now both Jesus and the disciples are searching. Just with the disciples, they're searching for someone who doesn't need to be found. Their searching is reactive. They're looking for Jesus, and Jesus isn't lost. But Jesus is searching for the lost. Look at the connection between the prayer and the preaching. You see, first he goes out to a desolate place and prayed. And then he says, "Let's go to the next towns that I may preach there also." There's a direct connection between the preparation that he did in meditation and the preaching that he did to win souls. We ask, why isn't the church winning more souls? And maybe we need to back that question up and ask, why isn't the church praying more? If we prayed more, do you think possibly we might win more souls? Certainly possible. Prayer is powerful, and we need to prepare. And Jesus not only prayed for himself, but he prayed for others as well. And we have this prayer in Matthew 9:37 and 38. "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." That brings me to my last point. Jesus was praying for more soul winners. And so we look at the last point at his multiplication. He multiplied soul winners. Jesus' plan never was for him to do it all himself. His plan all along was to get those who came after him to win more souls than he did. What do you think about this verse in John chapter 14, verse 12? "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father." Now, in what sense did Jesus' disciples do greater works than he did? Have you ever thought about that verse before? How did his disciples do more than he? Certainly, they couldn't do more in terms of power. Only Jesus could walk on the water. Only Jesus could feed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Only Jesus could do that. But they were able to do more in terms of quantity. It's not quality, it's quantity. They led more people to salvation than Jesus did personally and directly. In fact, some have said, and I've never taken the time to check this, but it sounds true, that on the day of Pentecost, more souls were converted than in the 3 years of Jesus' public ministry combined. That's the fulfillment of what he said would come to pass, John 14, verse 12, that they would do greater works. While we're winning souls, we've got to be preparing others to do the same after we are gone. You're probably familiar with the book 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell, because Mike Winkler is your preacher and he's the one that introduced the book to me. But it's a good book. It's been out for a long time now. A lot of people have read it, and you probably know the premise. There are 21 laws for leadership. And one of those laws is the law of reproduction. And the law of reproduction says it takes a leader to make another leader. A follower cannot produce a leader. A leader has to produce a leader. And the way he puts it is, it takes a leader to know one, to show one, and to grow one. Well, I think the same thing is true of a soul winner. It takes a soul winner to know a soul winner, to show a soul winner, and to grow a soul winner. Where's the church going to be in 10 years if we're not winning souls now and demonstrating how that is done to those who are coming behind us? It could vanish away in a generation if we don't consider multiplication as Jesus did. You know, the disciples watched him with Zacchaeus. They watched him with the woman at the well. They watched him interact with so many people. They saw his methodology. They saw his mission, and they learned from it. There's no greater example. We could look at books and go to lectureships and learn from institutions on evangelism, and all of that would be valuable, but nothing, I believe, is more valuable than studying the life of the greatest soul winner who ever lived, Jesus Christ. And we see in Jesus these wonderful precepts. Let's put them into practice and follow in his steps and win more souls for Christ.